Good afternoon, everyone. This is Joe Papano from Fiberlink Communications. We're back again with another one of our more webinars. It's been a few weeks since I last did one, so I'm happy to be able to join again, and want to thank all of you folks for joining as well. A couple things I wanted to kind of clear up first, then we'll jump into the presentation. So for all of you who participated in our feedback survey on our webinars last year, thanks. I think John Harrington sent the t-shirts out yesterday, so you should be getting them in the mail soon. We appreciate the feedback, so we got lots of good suggestions, both ways to improve the format of the webinars, as well as tons of great ideas for future webinars. So thanks for that. The format's going to be kind of the same. We've got about 30 minutes of slides, and then we'll open the floor up to Q&A. We're not going to do a live demo today. Usually we do, but we're not today. And Brian and I will do our best to answer your questions. So with that, what I'll do is kind of really jump into the topic today. So we're talking today about best practices for securing the Kindle Fire in the enterprise. So I guess I would say this: it looks like the Kindle Fire is the first first tablet device that isn't an iPad that seems to be getting any interest at all from the marketplace in general, in a consumer sense, and any real interest at all from corporations in terms of can they adopt it and use it. So obviously it's still relatively new. And iPads are obviously still the preferred device, but there are companies that are beginning to explore them as an option. And so we wanted to present a little bit of information about what we know about them, what we've seen. So Brian Christini from our product management team is going to join today. Brian's our subject matter expert on Android and owns kind of the Android-related features in MAZ 360. So he's a great resource for information, and he's going to talk to us a little bit today about the device itself, the Kindle Fire, pros and cons of using it, what we're seeing with some of our customers and prospects that are beginning the process of exploring whether they can use it or not in their business, and then kind of some general conclusions at the end. So before I hand it over to Brian, a couple things. John Harrington's going to be sending out some links now for you to follow us on Twitter and to tweet at MAZ360 about today's event. If you've got any Q&A we can't get to, or you got any other comments or great ideas for future webinars, please feel free to interact with us there. We're kind of manning that right now, so there are folks here that will be able to get back to you. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian. Brian, thanks for joining today.
Yep, thanks, Joe, and thanks to everyone for joining. Pretty interesting topic today. So Joe touched on this a little bit. I'll just hit on it quickly. So just as a kind of informal agenda here, I'm going to set the stage a little bit, talk about the market, what we're seeing out there. Just in general, that's really the reasons behind why the Kindle Fire is even relevant for us. We'll dive into Kindle Fire just a little bit, just to make sure we're all an understanding of what it is from a specs standpoint, from an experience standpoint, because really the experience is part of the differentiation that Amazon's brought to the market, and the reason it's had so much success so far. Then I'll jump into kind of pros and cons of using it, both from a personal and business perspective, and probably why most of you have joined us today to learn how it can be managed potentially in an enterprise environment. And then once we get through that, talk through some of the best practices for managing these devices once you have a little better understanding of some of the pros and cons that come with this device. And then wrap it all up. So just to set the stage here, for those joining, I'm sure you're very familiar with a lot of these, but really mobility in general in the business and the enterprise is pretty ubiquitous, along with internet connectivity. They're almost assumed at this point that people want to be mobile and they want to use their devices. Consumerization and BYOD, put into a single bullet point here, we definitely spend an hour going through those topics and how they're impacting the industry and the enterprise in general. But consumers are choosing their preferred technology and bringing them into the enterprise and asking them to be supported because they want to use them for email, among other things, to be able to be productive wherever they may be. There's benefits to BYOD for an enterprise as well in terms of cost, productivity benefits, as well as making their employees happy. But you need to make sure you can manage these different devices. Tablets and the tablet explosion is a great example of both of these, consumerization and bring your own devices. It started with the CEO or the C-level bringing an iPad into the environment, and then of course it's trickled down now to every all employees wanting to bring their own kind of different devices in there. As Joe mentioned, the iPad was definitely the initial winner and still is in terms of iPad or in terms of tablet adoption, and will be for the next couple years. But Kindle Fire made a really strong showing, and we'll kind of jump into how it differentiates and some of the reasons behind that. But projections were 4 to 5 million sales in Q4, and I haven't seen final numbers yet. But if that's the case, it's basically become the second most popular tablet outside of the iPad in the marketplace. So if you currently are seeing a Zoom or let's say a Samsung Galaxy Tab being requested for support in your environment, be sure that a Kindle Fire will be there soon enough with the same request.
So we're gonna run our first poll here. So John's going to start that up. One thing I wanted to say that we noticed in our business when Apple released the iPad, it really changed the dynamic of kind of what MDM meant to companies. And what we saw was a smartphone, even though it could do a lot of things, it was still primarily about getting email and contacts and calendars synchronized with your kind of corporate mailbox, and that was primarily what people was still the fundamental use case. It was communications. The iPad really changed the game, and that was where we started seeing a lot more interest in things like, how do I push apps out to this thing? How do I push content out to this thing? Because people were really starting to think about using them as a way for people to get their job done, not just interact with them or communicate with them. So that changed things a lot for us in terms of what we saw companies needing from MDM.
No, it's a great point. Just to throw some stats that I think we're popping up on the survey poll that's out there now, but in the past our survey has said basically 77% of businesses plan to support or are considering a bring your own device program in 2012. And then tapping onto the tablet explosion, 86% of businesses said they would plan to consider supporting tablets or already supporting tablets this year. So it's a large part of businesses, and again, the relevance today is Kindle Fire is another one that's making a pretty big splash that you'll need to be aware of, and we're going to talk through that. A big part of that, and just kind of set the stage, is just a reality we all have to deal with now with consumerization and bring your own device. And I put holiday season here, but it's really any kind of updates, upgrades, new devices. It really brings a kind of it brings zero-day support to the forefront. And what I mean by that, when Christmas comes and you have those 5 million new iPads or Kindle Fire devices that have been sold and given to these end users, the next day they're coming into the office and asking for support in one way or another, and you need to have a story around how you can support it, and then thinking back, how the person you may use from a device management perspective will also offer support. And again, it's not just the holiday season, it's upgrades. So in iOS 5 was another perfect example of this. And of course, how is IT going to manage all these different devices in the environment today, which we'll dive a little bit into as we go forward. So just touching on the Kindle Fire from a specs perspective, as an overview, it is a 7-inch tablet. It does run a modified version of Android Gingerbread 2.3. It's less than a pound. It's a little thicker than, if you haven't seen one, a little thicker than an iPad or Samsung Tab today, but still pretty small in terms of thickness. Easily stick it in pretty much a jacket pocket or any laptop bag you may have. It's very lightweight. It's got 8 gigabits of storage, though it does not allow for you to add an SD card, so there's no SD card storage there. And these things are fast, so 1 gigahertz. It's a dual-core processor. I recently saw the Asus Transformer, which has a 4 4-quad core processor, but this is fast. It is fast. It's got a great display. It does not have a camera, which could be good for some businesses that don't want users taking pictures, and you don't have to worry about setting a policy. It doesn't have a camera, but it is a limitation on the end user side. It's Wi-Fi only. There's about 8,000 plus, and that number is definitely growing on the application side. So it does rely on the Amazon App Store for delivering apps to the device. And really the price point has been the big piece here that's kind of helped with the explosion of this device in particular. Not everyone's ready to commit $500 for an iPad. $200 entry point seems to be a splash in the consumer market for these devices. And just to touch briefly on the experience here, now Kindle in general, a lot of people think of it as an e-reader. Kindle Fire obviously brings a lot more to that. It's not just an e-reader. There's a ton of media you can consume on these devices, whether it be movies, TV shows, e-books, music. It's all available, and you get Amazon's great content network to be able to basically have at your fingertips through this device, and it really has been a differentiator for them. They got a slick browser, and of course it supports Adobe, which the iOS devices do not, so another benefit there. Amazon Prime is a great way to get this content, and they have some benefits if you do join up for that service, free shipping, etc. And Android in general has a lot of free content you can download onto these devices, so ebooks, videos, movies, etc. There's a lot of stuff you can get on this device without needing to actually, pull out the credit card, which is pretty important, and consumers need that. I mean, for the ones that want that lower cost service and still kind of get the great experience, this is definitely an option for them.
Well, one of the things that I'm anxious to see what Amazon does here is, right now this whole space with mobile devices, it's kind of the battle of the ecosystems, right, between Google and Apple and now Amazon. One thing that's kind of a little bit unique about Amazon's ecosystem is they've actually got this huge ecosystem that is able to deliver, hard goods, physical goods to your front door in, 24 hours if need be. And I'm kind of anxious to see how they leverage that aspect of their ecosystem, through these devices, because it's, an obvious advantage they've got in terms of the ecosystem wars that are going on.
Yeah, absolutely, and I would say that's a big differentiator in why we saw. And people are familiar with Amazon. They've used it. They understand how to buy content from there. So this is just making it easier for them to do. So some of the pros and cons from a personal perspective, again, it is low cost, does have that great kind of content ecosystem. Again, getting back to for WhisperSync, getting back to actually using it as an e-reader, if you have multiple Kindle devices, or you just have the Kindle app on an iPhone or Android device on top of this, it syncs, from a bookmark perspective where you left off. So it's got a good way through the cloud to sync on keeping bookmarks on books or docs you're reading. It does come with free cloud storage, which is really important for this device because it does only give you that kind of 8 gigs. So they recommend that you actually store a lot of your content on the cloud. It is email capable and fast, so you can get certain email on there, especially using a browser. Some of the cons, again, there's no 3G option, so you do need to find Wi-Fi connectivity to actually get to all this great content. It does not support the Android market. So Amazon wanted to give you its own App Store experience, so they actually do not allow you to get to the Android marketplace from the device to download applications. And there's some cons there, and I'll talk to you from a business perspective as well, but most of the games and stuff will get there, but there's some concerns around that for enterprise apps you may use. Lack of a camera, again, consumer not able to take pictures, and they can certainly view pictures on the device, but they can't create new pictures on there by using the camera. No GPS options for benefit to certain websites that may use your location to provide you content. And there's limited home screen customization. So it's kind of interesting what Amazon done. It seems like they love the fact that they've been able to customize this device, but I think the look and feel is almost more like an iPad as opposed to an Android device, in that they're kind of giving you the experience as opposed to allowing you to do a lot of customization. So they like the customization on the back end, but I think they like the usability that the iPad's given and kind of met somewhere in the middle on that.
So a couple questions, Brian, came in on this slide as you were going over kind of these features. So one question was, is there any Bluetooth support in the Kindle Fire?
No.
Okay. So I know I have an iPad. I've actually got two iPads, and I enjoy my Bluetooth keyboard when I want to compose some email. So that is a nice feature for business use. Another question, is the Kindle Fire able to access apps at locations other than Amazon?
Yeah, so we'll touch on this one a little bit more down the line, but there's certainly ways to put applications on there outside of the Amazon App Store, which is the case today with Android as well. But from someone who's not savvy, yes, you're kind of limited to what's available on the Amazon App Store.
So I mean, unless you want to go do some sleuthing and figure it out.
Yeah, from an enterprise perspective, there's definitely ways you'll be able to get your apps on there. But from an end user that's not very savvy, they would think that Amazon was the only way.
Okay. And last question: how much cloud space is given for the cloud storage?
It's a good question. I thought it was unlimited. I would need to we can certainly get back to you afterwards on that one.
Well, we'll have John here try to see if he can find that while we keep rolling here.
No, that's a good question.
Oh, someone else responded privately, 5 gigs.
5 gigs. Oh,
so
well, thank you very much.
5 gig free. So lots of folks are replying back with that. Thanks. And I think there was one other question. Does it have a USB interface?
No, it does not have a USB interface. And in terms of, I think I saw something about battery life. Battery life is actually really pretty good. So it's comparable to an iPad or an Android tablet. I think they say you get 8 hours of continuous reading, but if you're using it for browsing and general stuff, you can go days without charging it. So it's better than a smartphone for sure.
Okay.
All right, so for business use, jumping on there, and we'll get back to, I see a lot of questions popping in. We'll get to some of these here. From a business use perspective, and again, this isn't from an IT management perspective. We'll get to that in a minute. This is from, an end user who wants to use the device and, benefits to them. Again, it is low cost if they're looking for a kind of bring your own device model where they like the bigger screen than maybe a smartphone offers. And the next one, secure app market, actually kind of ties to both the end user and the enterprise. But Amazon actually does have a process for you to submit an application on there, and they do vet that out before enabling on the Amazon app. So it's actually a little more, I would say, I don't want to say secure, but a little more vetted process in terms of enabling or allowing applications to actually get onto the Amazon App Store. Browser is very fast, and again, it's the dual-core processor really helps out there for multitasking. It's very portable, and again, it's very easy for content consumption. However, some of the cons on there, it is 7-inch. I think the 9, 10 inches is probably more seen from a business perspective, especially as you want to start getting into creating content as opposed to just consuming it. Again, no Android market, so there are some limitations in terms of business applications out there. And again, if you are developing applications on the Android market, you would need to submit that to Amazon as well and go through that process. No 3G option, so you do have to get fine connectivity. There's no native email client on the Amazon Kindle Fire, so you will have to use a third-party client for that, which could cost money. And again, going along with the email client, calendaring and stuff, it's not natively built into here, so you will need to use third-party for that.
Okay, so those are nice things that kind of come standard with an iPad.
Yeah, stuff if you're using it from a business perspective, you would from an iPad or Samsung or Motorola. You would be used to that today. That's not there natively. Really, and I'm sure this is the question of why most people join the webinar today. It's great that the user likes it and then they can use it for both personal and business reason. But can it be managed within an enterprise environment? And there does seem to be some misconceptions about this out in the marketplace as to whether there are management capabilities built into here that third-party MDM providers can leverage. And we're here to provide some facts and some more understanding to help answer that question. So we've basically done a comparison of the Kindle Fire versus what's available natively on an Android device running the same OS version. and kind of the pro-con format. We've listed some pros and cons to that, so some differences between that and some benefits as well. And we're going to talk through some kind of best practice recommendations around if you do plan to support a Kindle Fire, how you should go about that. So again, we've done the testing here, and we want to, we've had plenty of inquiries from customers who have gotten them, who are trying to figure out whether they want to support it or not. So we do have documentation, et cetera, on this as well. But to kind of bring you that in a summary fashion, we'll walk through it here. Really one of the key benefits here is you can administer, or from an MDM perspective, you can register as a device administrator on this device, and this gives you controls to a lot of management capabilities on the Kindle Fire, similar to what would be available with an Android 2.3 device. And what I mean by that is you can do over-the-air policy configuration, so you can actually enroll these devices in a similar fashion. You can set up a passcode and enforce that passcode on the device. So one of the first initial requirements we get in every conversation is, can I set a passcode remotely? Can I enforce that passcode? Can I set it up so that if they, put the wrong passcode in X number of times, wipe that device? Which, probably leads to the next big thing is I want to have a passcode, and then if that device is lost, I want to make sure I can wipe it if it's going to get any corporate data on it. But there's some additional things you can do. You can do application compliance. So if there's certain blacklisted applications out there, or applications you would like to blacklist, or if you want a more whitelisted environment or required environment, you can certainly set up application compliance as part of policy for these devices as well. You can push down a Wi-Fi profile to this device. So if you wanted to push down the Wi-Fi profile configuration to a Kindle device, as opposed to having to give that information to a user, if they're enrolled into kind of a solution to manage this device, you can also push down Wi-Fi profiles to it. As well as email configuration, again, that would be through a third party because it doesn't have a native email client on there. So there is a little additional cost to be able to do that. Device management, as I mentioned, you can wipe. You can do selective wipe, which is a term in the industry I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, where you can basically remove the profile configurations you push down to that device without sending it back to factory defaults. So this, would be your Wi-Fi profiles that you do set up. If you did integrate in with a third-party email client, you can pull them away as well. So some additional things here, from the testing, you can reset a passcode. So of course, if you do set up a passcode on the device and the user has to be concerned about it not entering it, X amount of time before it wipes, you do need a way to obviously reset that passcode. You can remotely lock it, send messages. So there's actually a pretty good amount from a policy configuration and device management perspective that you're probably familiar with from managing other Android devices you can actually do on these devices. And of course, you get the basic hardware, software, inventory reporting can be pulled from these devices and put into a system to manage it from an overall perspective, just in terms of how many devices are on your are out there and how they mesh against other devices in your environment. Application and dock management, so you can push applications, recommend applications that are on the Amazon App Store, push out documents. I'm going through a lot of stuff here. I'll drill down into a little bit more in the best practice piece. But the key point here is there's a lot you can do on these devices, and if you're familiar with managing an Android device, also running 2.3, it is very similar.
So a quick question, I guess one thing that help desks typically want to be able to do for lost devices is do a locate. I'm assuming since there's no GPS, that capability is not available.
Yeah, that's correct, and that's a great segue. So here's the pros. Again, we have some documentation here which you can certainly share, but as we get into some of the cons, and there are a couple, so even as you can manage these devices and push these different policy configurations around, there are some cons to make sure you're aware of. I want to make sure you're aware of. One of the biggest ones, and I'll touch on this one in the next slide as well to make sure everyone's kind of understanding here, but it does not support Android's C2DM framework. So that's their cloud-to-device messaging framework. And again, I'll touch on that in a minute. It doesn't have hardware encryption, but no 2.3 Android devices, or I won't say no, some do, but most Android devices running OS 2.3 also do not have hardware encryption, so this is in line with other Android devices, but it's still a limitation in terms of enabling into the enterprise. Again, it doesn't support the Android marketplace, and not all marketplace apps are currently on Amazon. So there are some limitations there, and if you do have applications you've pushed out, you will need to look to make sure that they are on Amazon. Certainly there are other ways to be able to get those on the device, but it won't be as easy and seamless as you're used to kind of with pulling something from the Android marketplace. And of course, if you did, as I mentioned earlier, if you did build an enterprise app for Android, you will need to submit that and go through a process as an Amazon developer to get that app published on the Amazon App Store. A couple other cons we've touched on. No native email application. Again, you would have to rely on a third-party application. Location detection is not available because it does not have a GPS. So again, that kind of action workflow of someone lost their device, I don't want you to wipe it, help me find it, kind of goes away. So if you lost that device, it's probably going to get wiped. And there's no clear OS upgrade procedure. So Amazon hasn't outlined this, at least from my knowledge, in terms of what the upgrade process will be for these devices. It could be good, potentially, if it helps with fragmentation in your environment, but some of the good stuff that Android's coming out with to help with hardware encryption and some of the other configurations you can do, it's not known yet whether these devices will ever get those updates.
So, hey Brian, I may be misinformed because frankly I haven't been plugged in that tightly to the Kindle Fire, but I thought Amazon did release an update already to it in early January.
Yeah, so they're releasing updates.
Oh, okay.
There's just not a real clear path in terms of...
It's unclear how from Google to Amazon to the end user that...
Exactly. So they're certainly getting feedback at this point in time and doing some updates on their own, but it's not clear of how the upgrade to Android new OSs will actually happen or if it will happen.
Okay, so there's a couple questions had come in kind of around the native email app. Obviously, you know, anyone who kind of deals with Androids knows about NitroDesk Touchdown. We obviously work pretty closely with them. Are you going to cover that later on? Or?
Yeah, so that'll be part of the best practice,
okay. Great.
For sure.
So yeah, obviously if you're going to need to look for a third-party email client, Touchdown's probably the one that's got the biggest adoption rate in the Android space.
Yeah, so I did want to touch on this piece, and I mentioned that it doesn't support Android's cloud-to-device messaging framework, and what that really does, it allows you to have real-time device communication. So, it's something that a couple of years ago, real-time, wasn't even as much of an impact. We're used to weekly, monthly kind of reports and all that. Now, real-time, if you play with a device and you push a profile down, you expect it to be done in seconds. So there are ways to combat that. And then through built-in timers to check for updates, etc. But it is a limitation that's there, and you do have to make sure that if you go for a solution that manages these devices, that there is a configurable option for you to be able to make sure that device is checking back regularly to make sure if there are any updates or actions available to it. So that is a concern. As we talk about best practice here in a minute, and kind of in a couple more slides how Master 60 has done that, we have built in those configuration timers to make sure you can manage it based on what your expectations are. This does mean, however, that a Google account is not required on a Kindle device. Obviously, it's not supporting a lot of the native Google features such as C2DM, which will require a Google account. So some people that is a good thing, but for the most part, if you do want to get any content on the device, you will need an Amazon account.
Okay, so I mean, a lot of these push networks, the whole reason they were developed, even from the beginning, when Microsoft came out with ActiveSync, was to deal with, the battery consumption issues of a, polling mechanism where the mobile device has to keep asking the server whether there's anything for it to do.
Yeah.
Versus being told, hey, there's something, please check in and find out what you need to do.
Yeah.
So it's a real
exactly the case,
issue.
Right? Apple's made theirs, the Apple Push Notification Service.
Right.
Google made theirs, and this is, that is their best practice for messaging a device. So there is an impact on battery by not having this there.
Yeah. So there are some real differences that you should be aware of if you're going to be thinking about this in a corporate world, maybe. So that's good information to have.
Yep. So I did want to point that out.
Yep. We're going to run our second poll here. So John's going to fire that up right now, and we'll give you a few seconds here while Brian keeps rolling.
Yep. So I'll keep rolling, and the next couple slides are just on best practice. From basically the information we gathered from testing in our environment and comparing it to the other Android devices. And the first piece, and this is really whether you plan to support Kindle or not, you really do need to gain visibility into your environment. You can do that using MDM or Exchange Active Sync tools to kind of get visibility into users or devices, Kindle Fire devices that may actually be connecting into your environment now. And then if you plan to support it, of course, you may let them into your environment after you set some policy, but if you do not plan, you're still going to need to be able to block these devices. So it's very important to get visibility into these devices to either enable or block from actually getting corporate data in your environment. Definitely recommend that if you do support them, you put them in their own separate group. Because of some of these limitations, you're going to want to configure a separate policy for them, and you're going to want to probably manage them in a separate fashion as well, at least from a policy configuration and making sure that those devices where you may need to increase heartbeat timers, let's say, are part of a similar policy where you don't need to worry about that on some of the other Android devices.
Well, so the poll results are kind of up, and yeah, I'd say this is pretty close to what we've seen as well. So there's certainly a pocket of companies, they're the minority, that are actively looking at the Kindle Fire, and most are on the fence, just like kind of what the poll results say. Obviously, iPads have all the mind share right now, or the majority of it in terms of enterprises looking to adopt tablets. So
yeah, in terms of verticals, we've seen them in education, e-books. The fact that I can push an e-book out to a Kindle and it's low cost and give it to an educational facility, it's definitely an alternative to an iPad, which will be 2-3x the cost there. Mm-hmm. Healthcare, where they're using it for training or just personal devices for playing games and stuff like that as part of care. It's a replacement for a netbook that they may have given in the past. So there's definitely some verticals that we feel this is a very good fit in. It might not be a fit for everyone at this point in time, but we do see it being used, and there are some use cases for it.
Yeah, and the price point's going to make people look twice. I mean, there's no doubt about it, regardless of whatever other kind of things you have to give up.
So best practice from a policy management, and this I'm sure follows your corporate best practice, but there is the ability, if you do plan to support this, to enforce passcodes on these devices. So set a passcode, as simple, complex as you need it or you feel in your environment. Make sure you set a policy to wipe after X failed attempts, and make sure, of course, that it locks after X minutes if there's inactivity on the device, to ensure that the device is secure, at least from an initial standpoint of to get into the data, I need to enter a passcode. You want to make sure you can do those actions, and again, if the device is lost or stolen, or a user forgets their passcode, that you can do it without, that you can reset it remotely. You can remotely wipe it. And then again, since a lot of these devices will be personally owned devices, you want to make sure that if I do put some corporate data on that, if I do integrate with a third-party email to get that on there, that I can pull those profiles away without necessarily completely wiping the device. And again, as I mentioned earlier, from a best practice standpoint, you're going to need to, again, you'll probably need an MDM vendor to manage these devices, to be able to set these policy configurations. That vendor will need some kind of configurable device check-in periods, because it does not, these Amazon Kindle Fire devices do not use the Google C2DM network. So you're going to want to make sure it checks back in for actions such as a wipe, or policy configurations, or apps or docs you push. In addition to that, you want to have a manual update button as part of that process on the device. And then, as part of policy management as well, you're going to want to enforce control of that device. So if you're going to allow it into your environment, you're not going to want the user to be able to remove that control. So set some policy to enforce that should the user try to remove control, you can take action and be alerted on that.
Hey, Brian, does on the Wi-Fi profile side, does it support, the 8021X, where, the typical types of settings a corporate IT group would set up on a corporate WLAN?
Yes, it does. Now, to be honest, we haven't tested everyone, but we've definitely tested some 8021X profile configurations on the device, and they did work. So, and that leads into the secure email component. So, email is still by far the most requested application for support, and we definitely recommend using a secure email client along with MDN solution to be able to do a lot of the configuration. And then, of course, if you do need to remove that data or that profile on the device, you can do so. And really, even taking a step back, one of the biggest issues with fragmentation in the Android space is the fact that they do not have a native email client that's kind of universal across all the different manufacturers that can be configured remotely. So we integrate, as Joe mentioned earlier, with Touchdown, who allows us and other MDM vendors to integrate with that, secure email on these devices that don't natively have hardware encryption on them. So they allow you to encrypt the email, encrypt attachments and contacts and calendar information on the device. But most importantly, allows you to configure that device and remove that policy and profile from the device should you need to.
So I'm going to throw one out there, Brian. So even though I've got an iPad, my phone is actually the new Samsung Galaxy Nexus, so I've been carrying Android phones for a while. I love this free app that you can get on the Google Market called Corporate Address Book. It was the thing I was looking for, to let you just do a quick lookup of the names and addresses in your corporate Active Directory. So anyway, I like that one, but obviously that's all it does. It doesn't do email or anything else.
No, it's great. That's a great point. People are looking for applications there to do those things.
That's my free pitch for the day.
Yeah, free pitch for the day. That's good. So app management's the next piece. And remember, the key point is the Android market is not supported on Amazon, so you do have to go through there. So if you are recommending applications such as WebEx, such as OpenOffice, QuickOffice, some of the other free applications your users may be using to do business work on these devices, you'll have to make sure that it's actually on the Amazon App Store before you do that. Otherwise, it will not be able to be recognized and installed. However, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't mean there aren't ways to get these apps onto those devices. So certainly you can still sideload applications or push them down in different ways. But again, you would need to be a little more savvy, and that's a little more for the enterprise as opposed to your users wanting your users to do that on their own. As mentioned earlier, it's good to have these these devices in a specific group, in a specific policy, so that as you do need to go through the process of recognizing what actually is available for these devices, you can push that out specifically to them. Bring over any kind of app compliance you may be using on your other Android devices for whitelisting or blacklisting certain applications or requiring certain applications to be on the device. That is supported. And of course, just push these docs and apps as needed. So doc management is supported on on the Kindle Fire as well. So if you do need to push ebooks or videos or PDFs or documents to a container on the device, you can do that.
So our corporate app store features in MAS 360 could be used to push apps out to the Kindle Fires? That's
correct, and so we'll see that example of pushing ebooks, which is a great example in education, as I mentioned, where if a school or a university does create an ebook that they want their students to use, as opposed to sending out a textbook, and they do have Kindle Fire devices, they can certainly do that. Push it down, make sure it's being downloaded on the device and used.
Let me ask you one other question. Are these as easy to root as most Android devices are? So
actually, Amazon's put some safeguards in to be able to do that, to be able to block a rooting device. Now, that said, I'm sure someone's going to figure out how to do it, but they are conscious of that, and that's something they're trying to prevent. So I would say it's more difficult than a typical Android device.
Typical Android device. Okay, thanks.
Just one note here on wiping a device, something we learned from testing. They have the Kindle Fire seems to have a low battery alert. So if you actually do push a wipe action to the Kindle Fire and the battery is low, it'll actually give the error message to the user, and it will power off once the user charges the device to a certain threshold. And I think it was 20%. It'll actually kick off the wipe at that point in time. But there is a low battery kind of safeguard in place on the Kindle side where it will not wipe until it is charged to a certain amount.
Okay, we're going to do our final poll here. So John's going to start that up, and I think fundamentally we're just asking, based on what you've learned today, what do you think the biggest limitations are from your perspective on supporting Kindle Fires in an enterprise type of an environment? So there was kind of some good points brought up. And while we're waiting for those to roll in.
Yep, so we'll just wrap this up with a conclusion right now in terms of what we went through so far. So again, tablets continue to be a hot topic in the enterprise space, and bring your own device models are definitely a major driver for this. And the reason why Kindle Fire is relevant, obviously, it's had a very successful launch, and IT will need to be aware of this device because it does provide many of the same concerns as any other mobile device out there, in that it can get corporate data on there if it is allowed to connect to your network. And though the Kindle does provide some unique customizations, it does generally provide the same management capabilities as any other Android device with a 2.3 OS. Though, as we kind of mentioned a couple times here, we would recommend from best practice you do create separate policy, separate group for these devices to be managed because of some of the differences and limitations we went through today. So, recommendation, evaluate. Obviously, you probably have a better understanding of that device now. You still need to evaluate in your specific use case and your environment, and as you do make that decision to support it or not, if yes, make sure that you do have the right tools in place to manage and enable these devices, and of course, secure email on them if you do plan to have corporate email on them. If no, if you don't plan to support the Kindle Fire, you still will need, or may need, some safeguards in place to block these devices from actually getting connected, because a savvy user that does have downloads an email application from the Amazon App Store, knows server and domain information, can get connected to your Exchange environment if ActiveSync is open today. So even if you don't plan to support them, you're still going to need visibility into these devices coming into your environment to block them if you need to.
That was fantastic, Brian. So, it looks like not too surprising on the poll results, right? I mean, encryption's always been an issue with Android devices, and certainly something that's, just airtight in the Apple sphere, which, frankly, is really an important feature for enterprises. So no surprise there. Lack of an email client, obviously for businesses, email's still the killer app, and not surprising that the lack of access to the Google market or the Android market Google runs is perceived as an issue, because that is clearly, clearly the other big advantage of tablets is that, they're much more of an app platform than a smartphone is. So, people really want access to good apps for them. So, not surprising.
Nope, great.
What we thought. So,
yeah,
I
great
think
feedback.
Brian's going to kind of cover now some of our features in MAS 360 for supporting the Kindle Fire. So we've got a couple more minutes of slides, and then we'll take questions. I know there's a few that have been backing up, so we'll get to them in a couple minutes.
Yep, thanks, Joe. So as noted, so through our testing and investigation here, we wanted to make sure we had support for this device because of its marketplace penetration. So we do have support within the MAS 360 as part of the standard service. It is available now, and support by meaning it's, it follows those best practice guidelines of make sure you have visibility into those devices that may be connecting into your environment. Be able to do over-the-air enrollment to enforce policies such as passcode, push down certain profiles such as Wi-Fi. It does integrate in with Touchdown, as I mentioned earlier, for secure email. It's secure email on the device, being able to push those profile configurations, and then, of course, being able to remove them if you need to. You can certainly wipe a device. You can reset a passcode as well as part of the standard action framework. And you get all the hardware, software, inventory reporting on these devices as well. As mentioned, another key benefit to this, and supported today, is you can push applications or documents down to these devices as part of the MAS 360 service. And of course, you can add compliance rules around that as well to what you may want to whitelist or blacklist or require from an application standpoint. So we offer pretty full support for these devices today, and it's available now. And of course, we do offer a free 30-day trial always. If you do have Kindle Fire devices in your environment and just want to see how it works, you can certainly kick off a trial anytime and kick the tires. And just, of course, noting, we do provide support for not only the Kindle Fire, but, various OS device types from iOS to your standard Android to Windows Phone 7, Symbian, etc., BlackBerry. And of course, just one point here, Network World did come out with a product bake-off earlier in 2011, basically comparing us to other vendors in the space. And the key point here is, we came out the clear choice winner, and especially the ease and usability of our solution was number one.
So in a minute here, folks, John Harrington's going to push out a link where you can sign up for a free trial. I mean, with Android devices specifically, because you don't need an APNS cert, I mean, you can literally go from literally nothing, to managing your Kindle Fire in 5 minutes. It's that quick to sign up, get an account provisioned, and send yourself an enrollment request and get going. So if you're really still learning about MDM, and that's certainly where we see most people in the marketplace, they're still learning, although 2012 definitely seems to be the year when people are kind of acknowledging they need to do something about all this. You know, by all means, take the trial, spend 30 days learning about MDM on us. What we hear all the time from folks is that MAS 360 is easy to set up, easy to use, and obviously we hope easy to buy once you've tried it. So give it a shot if you can. We get lots of good feedback, and we'd love to have yours as well. One last time on tweeting things out, a reminder here, you can kind of follow us on Twitter if you've got comments, questions we couldn't answer today or couldn't get to, ideas for future topics. So we're manning that, and please feel free to interact with us on Twitter if you want. And then kind of one wrap-up slide here before we get to the questions. So Brian's contact info is up here as well as mine. Feel free to contact either one of us if you've got more questions. Our next webinar in 2 weeks is going to be a biggie, so building apps for iPhone and iPad. So we're going to have Ryan Hope, who's our Director of Engineering, presenting on how, you know, what we've learned in our couple years here of building apps for iPhones and iPads. So obviously, if you or folks in your company are thinking about building apps for iOS or have built apps for iOS and maybe would like to learn a little bit more, please spread the word and send the invite you'll get out to them. I think 2 weeks after that, or maybe 4 weeks after that, we're actually going to be doing a webinar on best practices for testing mobile apps. So we're going to, start with showing you how you can build them, and obviously building them is only half the problem. You've actually got to test them at some point. So Frank Schlondorn, our QA director, is going to be talking about what we do to test our apps. So I think those things are going to be well received because they were part of the feedback that we got from you on our survey at the end of December, which was, could you give us more detailed information about developing apps? So we're listening and trying to respond. Obviously, our past webinars are all recorded. They're on the Master Center. I think John's going to push out a link in a minute to where you can kind of go back and view any webinar that is of interest to you. Obviously, there's lots of other content at the Master Center about iOS, iPhone, iPad, Android, ActiveSync, Kindle Fire, Cisco CS. So just about anything that is out there on the market today. People here at FiberLink carry them, use them, we test with them, so we've got a lot of experience and feedback. If you don't see something up there and you got a question, feel free to post something on the Master Center, and one of the folks here at FiberLink will get back to you that way. So that's another way you can interact with us. So it's a great resource. I think we got about 125,000 visitors to the Master Center last year. So there's lots of folks there already, and we'd certainly encourage you to join the crowd there. With that, I'm going to end the talking part of this and kind of get more into the answering part.
Yeah, so I see a couple here, and I can jump into. So I did want to confirm, and I did mention selective wipe a couple times. So the option to do a full wipe is certainly there as well. Someone asked the question to confirm that. So you can certainly do a full wipe on that device and send it back to factory defaults. But with the integration, once some of those profiles are managed, you get the ability to do a selective wipe as well.
So I saw a couple questions about Citrix, which is obviously an app people are really focused on for enabling access to kind of corporate resources from these mobile devices. Do you know of the Citrix receivers available for the tab for Kindle Fire?
I haven't gone through extensively all the applications that are available. That said, I would say a good part of the enterprise ones are available. However, I've seen apps such as Concor, which is a travel reimbursement expense management app, is not available on there, right? So there are some that are available in the marketplace. I haven't done extensive research on that, though.
So I don't know, maybe if one of the folks on knows more about it, maybe you could shoot that over. There's another question about whether the device has an SD card. I think you covered that one. I don't think there is any external storage available.
Yeah, there's no SD card slot. It does have a micro USB slot for charging and connecting to a laptop, but it does not have SD card storage.
Okay, and as far as that's just to tether it to a laptop?
Yeah, or to charge it, of course, yeah.
Okay. Another question that came in, or just to give you a little bit more info, so on the cloud storage, Amazon offers storage of anything you buy from them for free on their cloud. You can buy more storage. It looks like here one of the attendees said you can get 20 gig for $20. So, they're obviously trying to make this really simple for people and not do anything. So one of the folks responded they have seen the Citrix receiver in the Amazon marketplace, and it is a free app. So apparently it's there. I would assume if it's there, Citrix must have tested it, and it must be working. It's obviously one of the, after emails, typically one of the key business apps that enterprises want to get deployed and use. And we certainly, have worked with it on other Android tablets as well as iOS.
That covered most of them.
Okay. I think we hit all the questions we've gotten, most of them kind of right in line during the webinar, so we'll give you a couple more seconds here to fire any in that you may have, and if we don't get any, we'll sign off and let everybody get on with their day a couple minutes early. So there's a question here about C2DM. I think the answer is yes. Since the Fire doesn't use C2DM, that means the only way to interact with the device from an MDM perspective is for the device to poll, which means our software would be polling back to MAS 360 periodically to find out what, if anything, it should be doing or needs to do. And obviously that does have an impact on battery life. And what we provide to help you manage that better is the ability to set those timers to values that give you the best trade-off between battery consumption and timeliness. So
noting, it's all there are diffs, so if we're not going to pull back information we don't need to because we already have. So a lot of it's just checking back to see if there are updates, which is pretty small payload. So again, if you're pushing out a lot of applications or documents, whether it be C2DM or not, there's going to be battery impact there.
Yep.
But it is a little more taxing on battery. But
so I guess a question here about MAS 360 itself. I guess asking if we're side-loaded in the on a Kindle Fire.
No, so that's a great point. I did mean to bring that up. So we do have our MAS 360 application in the Amazon App Store, specifically supported for Kindle as well. So you do not need to sideload the application. You can download it directly from the marketplace. We have already gone through that process to make sure it fit in with Amazon's requirements.
And there's a question about billing. So everything with us is simple. So for MAS 360, billing is just a simple per device per month fee. There's no other charges. That fee includes 24/7 by 365 support and everything else. So it's pretty simple to buy, just like it is simple to try and use. So folks, we haven't gotten any other questions here, so I think we're going to sign off. We're just up we're just about up against 3 o'clock, so want to thank everyone for participating. Want to thank everyone for the questions, the poll interactions. If you've got any additional questions, you've got Brian's email address as well as mine, and obviously you can use Twitter or the Master Center to interact with us as well if we didn't get to your question. So thanks again. We'll see you in 2 weeks.